morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Megs Reynolds, and I'm the Executive Director of the Do More Agriculture Foundation. And I want to give a special shout out to Saskatchewan Mining and Minerals for not only sponsoring us being here today, running this panel, talking about stress, but their commitment to the agricultural industry, to rural communities in Saskatchewan, Chaplin specifically where they operate, and just their leadership when it comes to prioritizing the conversation surrounding mental health and agriculture. The Do More Agriculture Foundation is the national voice and champion for mental health in Canadian agriculture, and we are working to change the culture to one where all are encouraged and empowered to take care of their mental well-being. Part of our journey has been, as more and more groups are coming into agriculture and mental health, really working to make sure we're talking, understanding how we all fit together. And joining me today is I've Got Mind. We connected with each other early last year and really found synergies in how we're going about talking about mental health and stress. Right now in agriculture, we have about 83% of our farmers having lower resiliency scores than the general population in the US. And in 2021, 1 in 4 Canadian farmers felt like their life was not worth living, wished that they were dead, or had thought about taking their own life in the last 12 months. That is why it's so important to be having conversations about mental health and prioritizing not only understanding the signs and symptoms of what to look for, but how we can improve how we go about our day-to-day, how we take care of ourselves, and how we take care of those around us. Now I'm going to call Bob up, and he's going to take it from here.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Meg.
Thanks.
How's everybody doing? Ooh, that's loud, eh? Good. We're thrilled to be here today. You know, anytime we get a chance to come out and share our message, but it's really interesting in doing this, how stressful it can be, right? Getting worked up, making sure that we got the right content, making sure that we can entertain, educate the people. Like, it's a lot to hold on to. So as we're talking about stress, we love to give strategies of how you manage your stress. So one of the things that I've learned when we're doing these types of events is I have to do some regulatory breathing. So I'd like you guys to do that with me. Real simple, I want you to practice the tool. It's so important that you're practicing the tools that you're provided in any walk of life. So all I do is real simple, is I take a big deep breath, hold it, count to 3, 1, 2, 3, let it go, 1, 2, 3, back in again, 1, 2, 3, hold it, release, 1, 2, 3, nice and easy. One more time, in, 1, 2, 3, hold it, and nice and easy, 1, 2, 3, let it out. This is a great strategy to use if you're starting to feel a little bit overwhelmed. When we work with groups and we're educating them on stress, it's so important that you have that ability to realize that you're getting a little bit too stressed and then implement some of the tools that are going to help you do that. Today we're going to be talking about the dynamics of stress. And one thing that we've learned working in this field and doing these things for so long is that stress is very underrated as a contributor to a lot of the mental illnesses that we see. When we live in an excessive amount of stress and we don't do anything to process that stress, it starts to do damage, physically, mentally, emotionally, all those different things. So it's really important to understand. I Got Mind. We've been around since 2008. I started this journey, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that, but you can see some of the pictures. We've been traveling throughout communities in Western Canada and North America for the last 15 years, trying to help people understand. Because all the technology we have, you listen to what the people are saying and how we can do things better and we can do them faster, but we as a society and as people are more broken and damaged than we've ever been before. So the technology is great, but our inability to manage ourselves has become greater because things are so much easier for us. So it's a double-edged sword that we have to be very mindful of, because when we're not, it can create a lot of problems for us as individually, and that is going to have an effect on the people around us. Being able to meet all of these wonderful people over the years, we've learned a lot, and we're going to share some of what we've learned today. One of the things that we found when we're talking about mental health is it can be a little uncomfortable for people. So we have this great tool. If you can get your cameras out and you can scan that QR code, I'm going to ask you some questions during the presentation. It's completely anonymous, and it shows the participants more than anything that we're not alone in this. And that's one of the things that I struggled with, is I always felt I was the only one suffering, that nobody else on the planet was going through what I was going through. And I'm going to share a little bit about how I ended up in there, but if you can go ahead and join on that, that would be great. I have a question for you right away. How comfortable are you talking about your mental health? Go ahead and grab your phones out and you can answer. I'm an open book. I have no problem talking about it. That's me. It's taken a long time to get there. Depends on who it's with. Sometimes we're more comfortable with different people. Some people it's just really uncomfortable, and then that bottom one says, you know what, I'm not interested, no thank you. And it's important to understand what our own restrictors are, because when we start to acknowledge the fact that we are dealing with something, that we are off a little bit, that we're feeling a little messed up, that's what can really help us get on that path. So let's see what everybody says here. Very good. So we got 55% saying that they're okay with it. And then another percentage saying that, yeah, it depends how comfortable I am with those people, right? It's a personal thing. And a lot of times when we're feeling that way, it comes with some shame. It comes with some guilt. And a lot of times we don't acknowledge that we were feeling that way. So it's important to understand, get comfortable having the conversation. The more comfortable you are, the easier it is to not feel bad about what you might be experiencing. How this all started was me and my time in growing up in Saskatchewan. I was Calgary born and raised. I wanted to be a professional hockey player more than anything in the world. I found myself at 17 years old being traded from Calgary to Swift Current, and that's when my real education in life began. Being on my own, I wasn't at home anymore. It was a really challenging time. I was supposed to get drafted that year in the first round of the NHL draft, so lots of stress, lots of expectations, and now I'm removed from what's comfortable and I'm thrown completely into the deep end of the pool. It was really hard living in somebody else's basement. He was an RCMP officer too, so I really had to mind my P's and Q's, which as a junior hockey player is not an easy thing to do. And I started to find my legs. I started to feel better. I started to feel more confident that I was going to be able to achieve that dream of becoming a drafted NHL player. December 30th, 1986, unfortunately, we had a bus accident traveling from Swift to Regina to play the Pats that night, and the bus went off the road, tragically taking the lives of 4 of my teammates. I watched one of my dear friends take his last dying breath. I was 17 years old, and I was never the same after that. After that happened, I completely shut down. I isolated myself. I stopped communicating. I started drinking. I started doing all sorts of things that I knew weren't good for me to do, but I didn't know how to deal with the emotional pain that I was going through. I grew up in an environment where you did not talk about it, right? You either got tough or you got out. And so I had to hold on to all this, and I didn't know what to do. And it really sent me on a journey that I was not prepared for. Struggling with depression, struggling with anxiety attacks, struggling with addiction, because that was the only thing that would help me sleep at night, because I couldn't lose the memories of what I had saw. All while under the tutelage of a very unhealthy leader in Graham James. So we got the perfect storm going on for a bunch of people to be really unhealthy. And that's how my journey into mental illness began. Never thought I would be there. And for a lot of us, that's exactly what happens. Life is fine, and something happens, and all of a sudden we find ourselves not well, not balanced, and don't know how we ended up this way. And it is part of the journey. We have to understand that it's part of the process. Life, the bigger life we live, the more can go wrong. And we have to have a very strong skill set in how to manage ourselves and our abilities and how we feel, because if we don't, all of those things that we want out of life start to fade away. And they start to become more of a burden than they are a reward, simply because we don't know how to manage ourselves. How this thing really accelerated, during that time when I started healing, I noticed a bunch of young men that I was working with, and I said, I've learned enough about me, now I can go and help them. And so I went about my way, and I did my work, and I worked with groups all over, and it was the Humboldt accident. It was April of 2018, and I remember sitting on my couch, and I got a text message from a friend, and it said, "Did you hear about the Broncos bus?" And right away my heart dropped. We proceeded to find out what had happened. One of my dear friends and teammates from my time in Swift Current, who scouts for the Calgary Flames, was in Okotoks. He came right over. We were on the phone with Sheldon Kennedy. He was a teammate. Another teammate, Peter Soberlak, who is a psychologist now. We all got together on the phone right away saying, how do we go and support this community? And I was terrified inside because that brought up everything that I had gone through. And I wasn't sure if I was completely healed. I felt better, but I wasn't sure. And so that night going to bed was a very, very anxious time for me because I was not sure if those nightmares were going to come back. I went to bed. I fell asleep. I woke up in the morning and I knew that I was going to be able to go to this community and support these people. We walked into the hospital that day, and it was very sad, and it was very similar, because all the families were in the waiting room, and when we walked in, they were crying and sobbing, and you know, we went in there and we were hugging each other and just trying to help them. We walked into the ICU unit, and yeah, this is where the worst kids were. It turns out that my billet, little Susie, who was 3 when I went through my bus accident, and her dad was the first responder on our accident because it was RCMP, Susie is now a surgeon. And she was the woman that was taking these kids in and helping them after the bus accident. It's amazing how connected we are. We went into the ICU and the families were devastated. And one family in particular I had known quite well. I had worked with their son in trying to help them develop the mental strength. And we went over and we were hugging the mom and dad, and the dad proceeds to tell me that the only way that they were able to recognize their son was the tattoo that he had got on his arm that summer of the work that we had did. It was Chinese lettering and it was PMA, positive mental attitude, and that's how they identified it. And it warmed my heart to know that we were there to be able to support these people in this pain that they were not prepared to have. It sucked when I went through it, and I couldn't make sense of it for years, but now it made sense. I went through it so that I could help other people. And that's one of the big things with mental health, is when we start to find ourselves, when we start to feel good, it's important that we are reaching out and connecting with others, because we now have an understanding of what's happened to us. There was one conversation with one of the dads. We grew up playing hockey together, and we hadn't seen each other in forever. And he proceeded to tell me about the last conversation that he had with his son. They're going to Game 7. If they win, they move on. And the son was so stressed and so upset and so anxious whether he was going to get to play in the lineup, and he didn't know what to do, and he didn't know how to talk to coach. And the dad was on the phone hundreds of kilometers away, not being able to be there to help him manage how he was feeling. And that was the last conversation he had with his son. So when he found out what I was doing, he made me promise. He says, Wilkes, you need to get this information out to as many people so that that's not the last conversation that they have together. And that's why we do what we do. That's why we travel around and try and help people understand about themselves, that it's a place where we end up. It's a part of life, but it doesn't have to be consistent, and it doesn't have to be as damaging as it can be. When we educate ourselves, we can find a better way. We were able to go out there and support. On the far right there, you see Bob Harriman. That was my billet. Next to him was Pat Noge, who is an RCMP officer in Saskatoon, was on the bus with us. You see Sheldon and Darren Kruger and myself at the far end. We were the survivors of the Swift Current bus accident. And it was a great experience for us to be able to go out there and help. And even talking with the kids today, how much they appreciate the information and the support that we gave them in that time. That's the beauty of getting well, is then we can truly help the other people that we want to help. This is a great quote. I believe that the greatest gift you can give your family in the world is a healthy you. And one of the most important things that everybody needs to understand about mental wellness, it is your responsibility. If you sit and wait, I promise you, people will not know what to do. It's your wellness. It's your mental health. And you have to start taking action towards it. Because in order to be the loving parent, supportive spouse, great friend, family, community member, you have to be the best version of yourself. So you have to be a little bit selfish in making sure that you're taking care of yourself. Because when you're running around trying to take care of everybody else, who usually gets neglected? You. And we have to shift that a little bit. In order for you to be able to be the support, you have to be able to give yourself the support. I'm going to bring my teammate Sean O'Grady up here. Sean has been with me since the Humboldt tragedy. I called him up right away and I said, listen, we got to go and do this. I made a promise. Will you come with me on this journey? Sean's been in the mental health field for over 20 years. And Sean's going to go through the stress performance curve with you to help you understand what stress is and what you might be experiencing.
Thanks, Bob, and certainly happy to be here. And just to take an opportunity, I think what the work we're in or what we're hoping to be in is the business of prevention. And the good news is that there is some really great pieces of information, awareness, understanding, and practices that can lead to a preventative mental health experience for people. Many of us, including myself, get to a place where we're pretty broken down before we decide to maybe do things to create a different pathway. And I was talking to someone at the exhibitor booth this morning about it would be really nice if we could help people skin their chin and knees a few less times than most of us do before we figure out a strategy. And so that's really what it's about. And I think understanding stress is a good and a really important piece of information, because stress is the thing that actually can create mental health or mental wealth, but it can also be the thing that creates mental illness. And I think it's really important for people to know that, is that most of us may see it or worry about it as something that we want to avoid. But in fact, all growth, right? Many of us can sit and reflect on the concept that all growth usually is through stress, right? And how we've come out of stress, and that idea that when we manage stress and we manage it well, it creates resiliency, right? And resiliency is the thing that I would believe wholeheartedly that you folks have each and every day as you're out working in the industry that you work in, managing the unpredictable experiences that come along with the farm world, right? Agriculture in general. I grew up a little bit in that world in the rural bowels of Eastern Ontario, and spent a lot of time in hay mows and painting fence posts and doing the sorts of things that my dad believed were an important rite of passage for me, and I absolutely believe that was key. And so I really do think there's so much with respect to this information that is important for us to think about each and every day when we're working through all the various challenges. And so as you can see on that curve is growth is right at the peak, right? And so when we're pushing ourselves, when we're stretching ourselves, when we're really moving beyond that is really where we do develop the skills to persevere and move forward. And like in any hill, the idea of a slippery slope is an area that you don't want to slip too far one way or the other, right? Some of the worry that I have, I work in the mental health field mainly in Calgary with children and youth, is those extremes, both sides of that, right? The idea of kids, I work in the child protection world, and so kids that have experienced significant levels of neglect and exposure to various trauma, that burnout, right? Being overwhelmed and not having people to take care of them and rescue them leads to that burnout. But we also then can appreciate people that aren't pushing themselves enough, right? People that end up on a couch a little too much, disengaged with technology, burning themselves out maybe from finger stress from the video games that they play and those sorts of things as well. And so really just wanting to spend a little bit of time unpacking that with you folks today, talking to you about how we know when we're in the zone where we are growing and learning and how to stay there, and how to recognize some of the warning signs that may identify that we're tipped a little too far down into that burnout zone. And got a couple of, I think, personal stories that we're going to go through that will help us recognize, do we see ourselves ever in those experiences? And then I think I'm going to share my own as well as a way for us to kind of make sense of some of this world. So I'll turn it back to you, Bob.
Thanks, Sean. All right, next question. Rate the level of stress you experience on a weekly basis. Scale of 1 to 5. How much stress do you deal with on a weekly basis? Meg?
Depends on the week.
Depends on the week. Very good. Yeah. There we go. So you can see there's a lot of stress people are dealing with. right? And it's important that we know that. Having the knowledge of being able to manage yourself is a wonderful thing. And being mentally well doesn't eliminate the stresses of life. It means that we're able to handle it, right? That we have the mental strength to be able to overcome. Like Sean talked about, we can put ourselves into that healthy stress zone and learn from it and really expand our capacity to deal with things. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But if we don't manage it, if you're a 4 and you find yourself you're a 4 every week and you're not doing anything to manage that, you will start to feel the effects of stress. I was reading a book recently on addiction, and they did a study out in Vancouver where they studied 80% of hospital visits were stress related. 80% of hospital visits were stress related, right? That's an amazing statistic. And because we're in that stressful environment too long and we don't know what to do, it can cause problems. Sean talked about the 2 different sides of stress, and when I learned this, it was fantastic. It helped me so much to understand how to put myself into that healthy stress, because in certain areas of my life, I had a huge capacity to deal with stress. As a professional athlete, you put me inside an arena, no problem. Last minute of a game and we're down by a goal, no problem. You put me into a family situation, I'm terrible. I can't manage any of it. I don't know how to do it, because then the unhealthy stress took over. Stress can make us grow and confident and help us achieve the things that we want. That's how we acquire our skills, is we stress ourselves out while we're learning it. We learn how to deal with the pressures and the demands of it, and our skill set increases. But when we're in the unhealthy stress, it absolutely creates our pain, physical issues, and destroys a lot of things. Our self-worth, our self-confidence, the relationships, opportunities, so many different things that stress will take away from you if you don't manage it correctly. One of the most important things that I really like to talk about when we're helping people take that stride towards living a better life is just vulnerability. The quote there that you see on the screen, the willingness to show emotion or not allow one's weaknesses to be seen or shown. That's when I first started doing this, I was scared to death. I had to stand up in front of a room of 300 people and talk about my story, and I had never done this before, so the stress level was quite high. And I got through it, and I was amazed at the end how many people came up with tears in their eyes and they were hugging, thank you so much for being vulnerable. And that was the thing that I was told to avoid more than anything in my life, was being vulnerable. Do not let anybody know any of your weaknesses or anything that you're feeling. But all of a sudden I had this experience of how everybody was so grateful for that. So it really changed my perspective and allowed me to start to be more open. And we're going to show you a little bit more of that today. I'm going to ask Sherry Gebhardt to come up. And Sherry and I have known each other for several years now. We actually connected. She's a former educator, retired now. And we were going to do some work in Kindersley with some of the kids that she was teaching. And the pandemic came and we never got that opportunity. But I asked Sherry to join our team. So she's one of our facilitators that works with teachers and students and families, because she's got 2 lovely daughters, and she was a hockey mom driving up and down the roads of Saskatchewan. And I asked Sherry to share a story of her growing up and some of the unhealthy stress that she experienced. So thanks, Sherry.
Yeah. So I was born into unhealthy stress. I was born in rural Saskatchewan to a family that there was a lot of abuse. There was, we felt in danger every day, so lots of trauma. So my little brain as a little girl was wiring for survival. And so everything that happened in my life, good or bad, I felt like I was in danger. Fast forward to middle school, I started having panic attacks at a really, really young age. I started playing basketball, moved away from home, actually moved to Swift Current, same place Bob was, to play basketball, and then I played at the University of Regina. During that time in Swift Current, I would have panic attacks all day long. And I really didn't know what was happening. I was in survival mode the whole time. Got to the U of R, same thing. I was losing my temper on the court. Things just weren't going great. I mean, I had a fairly decent career there. Fast forward to life after basketball. I married a farmer when I was 27. I had absolutely no skills. I was still just surviving. So the marriage didn't last very long, but I had 2 children. I became a single mom, working full-time, coaching full-time. I actually taught at Tom Collegiate here for 15 years in Regina, and then I moved to a smaller center. During my time here at Tom, I was overloaded. I was in burnout. Every day I would come to work, right, get the kids to daycare, get them to school, and I would be living in the overload and burnout on that scale that you saw. It started to catch up with me. So as I went through my career, I was beginning to take some time off of work. I was overloaded and burnout. I had to take 6 months here, a month there, because I was having panic attacks at work. My body was starting to break down. So at about 45, from all the trauma and lack of coping skills, I finally was diagnosed with a mental illness. I thought, okay, good, I know what's wrong with me now. I started some medication. I felt like things were going pretty good. Panic attacks returned. It started to get worse. My body was just breaking down and shutting down. It was like my organs were shutting down. 49 years old, had a complete shutdown. I couldn't walk across the street. I couldn't be alone. I couldn't be with people because I was panicking. So I had a complete breakdown. My body just said no, finally, because I was living in that burnout for that long. So at 49, I had to learn how to live again. I had to actually rebuild myself. And I started with my brain. So I started figuring out what was happening inside there for all those years. And I started to learn some coping skills. I educated myself. And what happened was I started to heal. And I'm 58 right now, and I've been working at this since I was 49. And I've made a turnaround in my life. And I'm able to function on a higher level. I'm retired now. I retired at 55. And life has been really good, but it's a grind every single day. I'm dealing with a mental illness, and so I have to work on my coping skills every single day in order for me to live a balanced life and stay in my window of tolerance and that growth, and not too far the other way in the green and not too far in the red. Every day I look at that stress curve, it just pops into my brain. And I'm like, where am I on that curve? Am I too far in overload? What do I need to do? I need to work out, I need to sleep more, I need to, less beer. I got to do all these things in order to stay in that growth spot on that curve. But I'm really happy to say that I'm still here, because there were times where I sat on the edge of my bed and wondered, should I go on or not? Should I continue with life or not? And at 49, I decided that I was going to continue. And I'm here today, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Well done. Now, is that easier that you've done it so many times because you're practicing vulnerability?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The first time I told my story was to some kids at school.
Yeah.
And I was really nervous. I didn't know if I was going to make it through, but
yeah.
I've told it a lot now and been through it, and it's much less stressful, yeah.
Very good. That's unhealthy stress. So now we talk about healthy stress. And this is a really fun one for me. This is when we're really good at our job. right? This is when it hits the fan and you're dialed in. You know exactly what to do. You know exactly how long it's going to take. You know who needs to be doing what, right? You're just so good because you've been in those situations so many different times. That's the experience of healthy stress. And it can help you accomplish so many different things, and you feel so confident because you can deal with these things. This was the most stressful moment. My dad couldn't even come to this game. It was the last year of my junior career. We were the best team in Canada. After the bus accident, 2 years later, we were the best team in Canada, and we're vying for the Memorial Cup. We're playing the Saskatchewan Blades, who we hated and destroyed all year long. We were really pissed off that we actually had to play them again. And we find ourselves into overtime. And in the locker room, we're laughing and joking and betting cases of beer of who's going to score the winning goal. And it all led to this. Guys, if you can go ahead and play that video for me back there.
This is Tisdale, a shot, and that was wide. After it goes Sutton, and he lifts the puck out to center ice. We're in overtime. We've played 3 minutes. That shot goes wide. Tisdale slaps it off the board. Tisdale trying to get up the second. Here's Tisdale rolling it in front. It comes back to Wilkie. Wilkie, number 24, watched by Holine. He's setting up. Here's Wilkie, moving right in. He can't get a shot. Wilkie still has possession. Gets it back to the point. A drive by Kruger is blocked. Kruger does the score! The Current Broncos have won the 1989 Memorial Cup.
It was the pinnacle, right? That's what we had. Go ahead and forward that, guys. Excellent. I think I can take it from there. There we go. There was no stress. People always say, aren't you a defenseman? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, why are you standing behind the net? And I said, well, I wasn't actually in front of the net. My defense partner was behind the net. That's how we played. No stress. We played to win. We knew that we could beat anybody. Didn't matter the situation. And that's what we were able to accomplish because of that growth, because on that rink, in that one area of my life, just one, I was able to constantly grow and make myself to be an extremely valuable and good hockey player. Again, you take me out of that, you put me into family situations and dealing with all those things, overload and burnout, overload and burnout. And so what happened, because I didn't know how to manage my life in the overload and burnout, it eventually started to affect my hockey career. I played 18 games in the NHL. Devastated. I was going to have a career. I was going to be someone that people knew. I was always talked about as a problem guy. He likes to drink too much. He likes to party too much. Right? That wasn't the case. I did those things because I didn't know how to cope with what I had gone through. And I knew that I couldn't talk to any of those people because if they found out that's what I was really feeling, I'd have been done. So I continued to hide. And it's important that we don't hide, that we recognize when we're in those situations and we start to do things differently. Sean, I'm going to ask you to come up and talk about some of the strategies that are really important to just being able to manage our stress in the moment.
And I think what's really encouraging about some of the things is they cost $0, which is good news. There's not too much we can find out in the world today that doesn't cost money, but luckily, consistent and focused mental health strategies don't actually cost a lot of money. In fact, they don't cost any money. Sometimes it is about finding the path for yourselves. The thing that's frustrating too is that it's an individual experience, just like trauma, right? People can really judge trauma because they go, well, that actually happened to all sorts of different people and they're not struggling, so why are they, right? We can lead with judgment. Most important thing you need to know about trauma and adversity is it's not the event itself, it's how our brains and bodies respond to it. And that's a very individual experience, just like the ways in which we cope are, right? That for some people there are physical activations, right? They want to get out, they want to move, they want to be outside, they want to get into movement activities, and that's really helpful, right? For others it's more internally driven. They want to journal, they want to reflect, they want to understand, they want to think. The important thing is really figuring out what those tools are for your toolbox and then using them. the neuroscientific world has had unbelievable advancements, and there's really, really great information we know about the brain, right? For example, we know that brains fully mature for males not till about the age of 28, and females 26. We've all kind of accepted that females are just more evolved than we are, or at least I have. I live in a house full of women, so I'm fairly outnumbered, and I've just accepted my fate.
Such a kiss ass sometimes.
Even female dogs. I don't even get a male dog, so good to get out on the road with Bob and talk every once in a while to get a little bromance going. We had a lovely dining A&W last night in Medicine Hat. It was spectacular. Yeah. But I think the important thing is it's really about the idea, what our brain tells us is neurons that fire together, wire together. We have to create pathways, right? And I think sometimes it gets a little bit discouraging for people because, you know, for example, they'll come and see me for some therapeutic work. And what is so important to impress on people is that's just the discussion that's going to lead to the practice, right? The idea that if we want to create new pathways, if we want to build better brains, we've got to consistently and predictably engage in ways where our neurons fire together in a sequence, so therefore they wire together in a pathway. And so for those of us that are out there trying to develop stress management techniques, the consistent practice is really, really important. And it's helpful to think about athletics in some ways, because when have we ever got better at skating or shooting or a golf swing without practicing it? Our mental health is the same, right? I think we need to have that understanding and that core information that if I'm going to get better at something, I've got to practice something, right? And so I think whatever that's going to be for you, it really is something that you need to find a rhythm on, and then you need to use it. And the key to most of it is awareness and understanding, right? When we have an awareness and understanding, to Sherry's point, right? When I start to understand within my body and within my brain, when I'm starting to take on a level of stress, our body speaks to us, right? It's really important for you to pay attention to that. How does your body speak? Do you get tightness in your stomach, right? Do you get some pain in your neck, right? Do you get a tightness in your chest, right? Does your head start to beat? That is your brain telling you there is something wrong here and we need to do something about it. And sadly, many of us ignore those physical symptoms. So then they start to create mental systems, right? And again, back to that point I was saying, that's where mental health can become mental illness, when we ignore what our bodies tell us, what our brains tell us, and then our actions tell us, right? And sadly, there are some really unhealthy things out there that temporarily help us cope, right? Lots of the teenagers I work with in Calgary, it's substances, right? Opioids, drugs, alcohol temporarily can numb some of the pain. The problem is then it doesn't actually create meaningful growth and change. It just compounds the problem, right? And so there are some unhelpful coping mechanisms that are out there too, when we haven't yet found ones that are adaptive and meaningful and actually create meaningful growth and change.
So at the beginning we did the breathing exercise. I asked you guys to do that with me. Now this one is one of the ones that people give us feedback on that works the best, right? When we take this into a corporate environment, an office environment, if it's an athlete that's struggling with something, if it's just a mom who's overwhelmed, this is a great one. So Sean, just walk through what this is,
right.
And let's see how you feel at the end of it.
One of the things that's important to know about when our mental health starts to become problematic is the idea of distress. We get into a distressing situation, and as humans, we are aversive to distress, right? And so we often, when you think about where mental health challenges come from, it's typically two things that we have very little control over. We have serious and pervasive regrets from our past, or fears and worries about the future. Neither of which we can do anything about, but so many of us that struggle with mental health, I'll put two hands up there because I've gone through my own phases, right? And let me tell you, when you've read all the textbooks and then you practice and you're supposed to be giving people advice and then you act like an idiot repetitively, it makes the guilt and shame even worse, I can assure you, or at least equally as bad. But when you think about where these problems come from, it's often worries and regrets from the past, fears and worries for the future. And what we really want to do when that becomes distressing to a point where our mental health is becoming problematic is do the only thing that we can and do the thing that actually works, which is to ground us back in what is happening right now, the present moment, the now. And so when people get high levels of stress and anxiety, it's really important to just ground ourselves back in, well, what are 5 things I can see right now? You know, a Toronto Blue Jays hat, you know, the table, right? What are things I can smell? What are things I can taste? And when we do that, we pull our brains from these provocative and distressing past or future worries, and we ground ourselves back in what is really happening in this present moment. And when we do that, that can become a really temporarily effective strategy to get us through a moment that actually what happens typically when we don't ground ourselves is that's where our bodies start to speak more, to Sherry's point. So a panic attack would be a classic response to our body and brain's inability to regulate our emotions in the present. And so then it starts to become more adversive and problematic, okay? Hopefully that's helpful and that makes sense. And those things are really interchangeable in terms of, you know, you got some young people or adults that it's like so there's no real rule there other than what our goal and purpose is, grounding ourselves back in the present moment.
Excellent. Thanks, Sean.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about just the home team dynamics and how stress affects that, because a lot of people don't realize the impact that my stress has on my kids, my wife, those things, right? And the team dynamic is one of the most important dynamics, and when we talk about what that is, it's a number of people associated in joint action. So that's the home team, and then you've got harvest, so you got a bunch of hands that come on, right? You got other people from other farms that are going to come give you the suppliers that you have. There's so many different people that you have that are trying to help you get where you want to go. The dynamic, this is a really interesting part, a force that motivates, affects development or stability. Okay, so if you're living in unhealthy stress, you can't manage your stress, what dynamic are you bringing to that team? And what is it creating for that team? I've lived in lots of environments where the minute the one person came in who was in charge and they did not know how to manage their stress, they completely changed the dynamic. Where we're all feeling good, but all of a sudden now we're all feeling on edge real quickly. And the team dynamic is really important. Again, reminder to do the work, to practice the things, because the team dynamic creates everything for us as human beings. Right? Everything that we are, everything that we believe in, the values that we hold, all the team dynamics that we've been a part of in our lives have formed who we are and what we believe. The issue with mental health, a lot of people grow up in a team dynamic that they think it's silly and overrated, right? That you don't talk about those things. I remember going over to grandma's for Christmas dinner, and there were certain things you were not allowed to talk about at that table. And a lot of it was the mental health issues that we were seeing. Why does Uncle Joe, never mind, just eat your potatoes, right? So avoidance was one of the things that really caused a lot of problems. And so when we understand the impact that I have and my inability to manage my stress, so if I really start to focus on that, will it change the dynamic? 100% it will. 100% it will. And that's what we really have to understand. The importance is, it's your stress, yes, it's for you to manage, yes, but it does impact other people. Positively and negatively, right? And that's the control, that's the responsibility we have to the teams that we play on, is to be able to really focus on creating the dynamic that's going to be successful and develop all good things so the home team can go and be successful. Listen, when I leave in the morning, I know that I have the skills and abilities because my family's worked on it. But I also know that when my son leaves, when my daughter leaves, and when my wife leaves, well, my wife's still working on it, but everybody else is really good. I don't have to worry about them because our home team dynamic allows us to have those conversations, to deal with those things, that when they step out to play on other teams and other dynamics, I know that they have the skills and ability to do so, because that's what we practice as a team. The unhealthy stress dynamic, you know, it requires a lot of courage to be able to just identify and talk about. And Sean and I, on the ride out here yesterday, started talking, you know, and I want to do this and I want to talk about, and I said, Sean, would you have an unhealthy stress dynamic that you would mind sharing? And he said, actually, I have a really good one. So Sean, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and share that.
Yeah, and I was sort of priming that earlier, is that for me, something that happened to me a while back, and I'm really kind of happy to at this point anyways, be on the other side of it, is the concept of really starting to believe that I was a fake, right? I was a fraud, right? And that really, I had a crashing moment in my own life where I was out doing this mental health work, right? Have a busy practice, trying to help families, trying to help individuals, teaching, working on delivering service, being, getting, positive praise and feedback, and then having inconsistency with my own family, right? And so that was a real crashing moment for me when what I felt like my front stage and my backstage were really far apart. And what it actually was about, I think, when I started to reflect and learn about it, was the concept of burnout. Is I was out doing so much front stage work, trying to help people and trying to do these things, that by the time I got home, I was angry and I was agitated and I was moody and I was unpredictable. And then I had these beautiful little girls that were starting to really worry and be scared and uncomfortable about, why is Dad acting this way? Let me tell you, that was a pretty crushing experience for me. It led to my own anxiety. It led to even some of my own panic attacks. Lots of self-doubt, lots of questioning, and a real worry about not ever being able to get that back. And what it actually took was vulnerability, honesty, and accountability, right? Apologizing for the inconsistency and how I was showing up for my own family. And I think when you do that and choose to be accountable for that, I think it makes it harder to keep doing. And am I perfect? Certainly not. And do I make mistakes? Absolutely. But it's sure been a wonderful last while to feel like there isn't that huge inconsistency between the mask I wear in the community and have it be all that dramatically different than the one I wear at home, right? And most importantly, actually, to just take the mask off and to try to be really confident with you folks that who I am as I'm up here talking with you is pretty darn consistent with who I'll be when I go home and give my kids and my family a hug, right? And I bring that up because I worry that many of us go through that many of us spend a lot of our energy with this front stage persona that we put on, and then literally just don't have the gas tank or the capacity to be a true and genuine and a person. I think some of it's okay to be aware that we're going to be more honest and real, in our own homes, right? That's not what I'm saying, but I'm just saying I would hope that maybe this can motivate or help people reflect on, if you have huge inconsistencies in who you are out there, with who you are with the team that should be the most important team to you, which is your home team. Give yourselves permission that it might just be that overload, that burnout, right? Trying to do too much to too many, and really, finding ways to cherish the ones that are the ones that really don't care necessarily about who you are out there. They care more about who you are when you're between the four walls of your house.
Yeah, very good.
Just wanted to leave that little story with you.
Thanks, Sean.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Megs, I'm going to come to you for a little bit because, growing up and living in the industry, you've absolutely dealt with the unhealthy team dynamic. I'd be really curious, because you identified that, you made some changes, and now you're creating the other side, the flip side, more of that healthy team dynamic. How's that going, and what are some of the things that you've done to be able to create that for your girls?
Thanks, Bob. So in 2018, I testified to the Agriculture Agri-Food Standing Committee that at that time I felt like I was digging my own grave to follow my dreams of farming. I felt like I had failed as a farmer, as a spouse, and as a parent because I was so overwhelmed and burnt out with just all of the stress that comes from farming, all of the uncertainty, and not at that time having any coping skill to knowledge that's on, and then recognize what. Sorry, I'm having mic issues. Thanks, Sherilyn. So I was at a point where, burnt out, super stressed, overwhelmed. I had a lot of body aches and pains because I hold the stress in my muscles. And I wasn't at a place where I even knew to look for signs or knew that anything was going on. And where I first started was trying to connect with people who understood what I was going through, people who were in agriculture, people who were farming, that had their own stories. And for me, that was the first thing and first way of saying, okay, I'm not alone. So taking away that isolation piece. And then I started to focus on how can I be aware of what I'm feeling, and how can I give myself some grace and space to sit with that. So if I overreact to the combine breaking down or my kid spilling something, that's not the issue. The issue is everything else that is weighing on me, the stress I'm not dealing with, not finding a way to process. So tapping into those things. And the other piece that really helped me was, especially with farming, with things being out of our control, is focusing on what is in my control. And the first way that I started doing that was I would write a list of everything that was keeping me up at night. And I know not everyone is a list person, but for me, I would do that. And then I would go through the list and I would cross off the items that I could not personally control. I couldn't control the weather. I couldn't control the commodity prices. I couldn't control if there were trade issues going on with India and we couldn't export our lentils that year or the price tanked. But that list got a lot shorter when I crossed those items off. And then I was able to focus on those things that were in control. And in doing so, I was kind of able to take back that control, and then suddenly now that stress level's coming down, that stress is at a place where it's a healthy stress, and now I can go into problem-solving mode. And what we've done with the foundation is understanding the importance of being able to connect with other individuals with life experience, but also understanding that we're all at different stages in our mental health journeys. And as it's already been talked about, what works for me isn't necessarily going to work for you. And there's a lot of people right now that want to be able to connect to others that understand, to have that peer-to-peer support. And so actually this Tuesday at the show, the Doomer Agriculture Foundation launched Ag Talk. And Ag Talk is powered by Together All. It's a 24/7 peer-to-peer support platform that's available for anyone who lives, works, and plays in the Canadian agricultural industry. It's free, 16 years and up. It's available in both French and English. And what I'm encouraging everyone to do with that is jump on there, sign up, and that can be a place where maybe you're comfortable sharing. And for you, that's your journal. That's a way for you to get that stress off your plate, to get that emotion out into the world, to set that thing down that's weighing on you or keeping you up at night. Or maybe you are in a good place and you've learned some really great tools along your own journey, and you're able to go there and to be part of the community and to give back by supporting others that are sharing and giving some advice on what has helped you, or maybe just some encouragement. Or maybe you're at a place where you just need to understand you're not alone. You're not ready to share yet. You're not ready to post. But what you can do is go participate and read and understand that you're not alone in what you're going through. And I can say, as someone who has been there, knowing that I was not the only one feeling that or experiencing that, that was the biggest thing that helped me in that moment. And I needed something to be able to get out of how, overwhelmed I was feeling, how burnt out I was feeling, just to be able to get to a place where it was like, okay, now I can start learning coping tools. Now I can start working on ways to deal with the stress that's every day, or the stress that can come up when suddenly you're in a drought year. One of the other pieces that's been really important for me are boundaries. And in farming, this is crucial. Depending on what is going on, there is so much on your plate with the seasonality, with the small windows we have to get stuff done. And then if you factor in having that bad year, how hard that can be and how much that you can't get it out of your brain of where things are at. So maybe looking for boundaries of, if you're in a drought year, maybe stay off social media. Because going on social media at harvest and seeing other people post about great crops and bumper crops, and that's not where you're at, could be hard. Maybe that is putting I've done this one year, electrical tape over the yield monitor on the combine, because I did not need to see how bad that number was when I'm sitting there for 14 hours. So finding ways to create boundaries that help protect you. And then we've touched on it, all of the items, those are all self-maintenance. You're not going to pull a combine out of the shed and go straight into the field at harvest. You're going to pull it out, go through it, do maintenance, make sure it's in the best shape it can be before you get it into the field. We need to think of our own mental wellness the same way and find ways to recharge our batteries. I'll throw it back to Bob now. Thanks.
Very good. Thanks, Megs. All right, I got a question for you guys. What's your takeaway of how you can improve your team dynamic? What can you do? What can you do to make it different? For me, it's talking about it. Because the minute I shut down about it, it changes the whole dynamic. So I've learned that I have to talk it out. What do you do to work on the team dynamic? What's your go-to?
My go-to is communication.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, being able to have an open mind and listen. And once you're able to listen, then you can respond rather than react.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, so that's my biggest thing.
Yeah, excellent. We got grow the team, communicate, exercise. Meaningful discussion, yeah, taking care of it. It's good for our brains, eh, Sean, that exercise?
Absolutely.
Helps us get regulated.
Dopamine release.
Dopamine release, yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing. It's great that you were able to talk, figure out some things. The website, you can go right there. Megs, just domoreag.
domoreag, and then /Ag Talk, but on all of your tables there are postcards.
Nice.
They have information on Ag Talk, they have a QR code. Please take anything that's there, scan it, sign up, and use it as a resource. So share it within your network. You know, we're so great in agriculture coming together and building community. This is a great way to build community and support everyone in their mental health journeys.
Yeah, check it out. One of the things that we like to do is to make sure that, hopefully there. How did you enjoy this today? Was it helpful? If it was, let us know. If it wasn't, well, we'll take a look at that and we'll figure out how to do it. We like the feedback. That's the one thing that we have learned is feedback is critically important because feedback creates awareness. So if you can help us out with that. Sherry, do you have anything to add as we wrap up today?
Yeah, just, you know, don't be afraid to try different coping skills. I mean, like Meg said, some things will work for me that won't work for her or whatever. And you know what, be curious, learn, right? Read about your brain. Start learning about it and good things will happen.
Sean?
Yeah, mental health is a continuum. Mental health is a continuum, and so, you know, I think it's just assessing where you're at, and if some fitness and healthy relationships are enough, great. And if, you know, there is a little bit more there that you feel like you need to work on, then there's some self-help and self-guidance. And then, you know, if it reaches, you know, a place that's more of a clinical level, there is really good professional supports and resources. I mean, I think they're building and they're growing all the time, but I do think in Canada and across the country and with great initiatives like, you know, the Do More Ag and even the Talk It Out initiatives, there's some really good meaningful work. And if you have the courage to reach out to someone and as a professional and they're not great, I'm sorry to hear that. We're not all great, myself included maybe, but try it again, because there just are good people out there, but it's a relational business, and so you need to make sure you have a relational connection with the person if you do reach out for some professional support. So if the first time isn't great, give it a try again. You know, you're worth it at the end of the day is what I would want to leave you with, for sure.
You're the most important person in your life. You truly are. And when you start to make that your priority is managing you, I promise you, you will see significant positive changes throughout your life. Just move yourself up, take yourself a little bit more seriously, be committed to you like you've never done before, and I promise you, you'll find what you're looking for. You can find us at igotmine.ca. My name's Bob Wilkie, and I can't tell you how much I thank you for your time and attention today. Thank you very much.